Hello, friends, and happy holidays. Tonight, we present to you a brief conversation with actress and artist Barbara Wilshere, who famously portrayed the intrepid Violet Smith in the iconic first-season episode, The Solitary Cyclist. As many of you know, that episode holds a very special place in the hearts of your humble hosts. So it was a great pleasure to spend a few moments speaking with this wonderful performer, as she recalled her adventures with Granada, Brett and Company, and Mr. Sherlock Holmes. And as always, a heartfelt thanks to our friend David for making this interview a reality. And now, we give you Barbara Wilshere. Well, Barbara, thank you so much for talking with us today. I know this is probably a bit strange, being asked to talk about a role that was over 35 years ago for you, but this part, Violet Smith, the Solitary Cyclist, IMDb actually has this listed as your very first television role. Is that true? And how did you end up coming to be cast in the part?
So, no, it is true. That was my first television role, and I was working in the theatre with a theatre company attached to Theatre Clwyd, which is in Mold, North Wales. It was my first job out of drama school, so it was a season with Theatre Clwyd, and we did a lot of touring, largely round Wales. And one of the shows we were doing was Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog. But anyway, I got a call from my agent saying that the producer and the casting director would like to see you, but obviously I was on tour, so they came to. I do remember we were performing in Cardiff at the time, and they came to see the show, and then we met up after the show, and they told me about the Sherlock Holmes project, and this was I've got to say, an incredibly exciting project for Granada at the time.
Yeah.
It was huge, and I was very naive, really. I'd only just started in my career, and as I said, I was doing theatre and didn't, I suppose, know how special it was. Certainly at that first meeting. So it was my first television interview. So it was all very casual because, they came to see me in a show.
Right.
Anyway, so they talked to me about the project, and then specifically that episode and the character of Violet Smith. And, obviously I was very keen to do it. It would have been my first television. Anyway, they were interested in me, clearly. But I think I got a call back from my agent a couple of days later to say that they wondered whether I was maybe a bit young.
Really?
Yeah. I was quite, although I was, at the time, how old would I have been? About 22. I was quite a young 22-year-old. Then they decided, they wanted to call me up to come and meet them at the Granada studios in Manchester. So I went there. I'm sure there were lots of other people up for the part. In fact, I did know someone who was at drama school with me, who, when I did the part and when she saw it on television, said to me, "That was my part." Well, it wasn't, was it? In the end, it was mine. But anyway, yeah, so I went and I read, and I think it was just those 2 interviews, and I got the part. They did want someone who was quite unworldly, let's put it like that. Not necessarily naive, but not someone who, someone sweet.
Fresh-faced.
Yes. And I'm not saying that I was, because I was 22, so I wasn't that naive.
Right.
But I think that looks-wise, I certainly came across like that.
Well, then, just out of curiosity, had you ever read the Sherlock Holmes stories prior to that show coming your way? Were you a fan?
No, I don't think I had read any. But of course, as soon as my agent told me they were interested in, I read The Solitary Cyclist, naturally.
Right.
And then I was, once you start reading them, then you really get the bug, don't you?
Yeah.
So I whipped through them.
Well, so right out of the gate, then you're on television. You're acting with Jeremy Brett and David Burke, John Castle. I mean, in the very first episode of this gigantic new series, no pressure at all. I'm sure.
But it's sort of mad now when I think back at it. But I didn't feel any pressure because it was all new to me. So the whole thing was so new that once I'd been cast in the part, I'd been cast, and I wasn't being arrogant about it, but because I didn't know the business at that stage.
Right, but you're right. You were right for the part, so it just fit together like a puzzle. It was great.
Yeah. Before we started filming, in those days, unlike now, you had the luxury of rehearsal, which for television you just don't get now. You go straight in and give your performance, whereas then we did, I think it was 2 or maybe even 3 weeks rehearsal.
Wow.
In London, and having never done television before, although drama school at Bristol Vic, where I was at, it was Bristol Vic Theatre School, and as with many theatre schools, or at the time, television wasn't taught.
Yeah.
And so we were taught theatre, and theatre is very different in many respects than the intimacy of television. And I do remember Paul Annette. Because I just done 9 months theatre with Theatre Cluid, and I remember Paul Annette saying to me, "Bring it down, Barbara, bring it down." Because I think I was giving, at times a bit of a theatre performance.
Right.
And so I sort of had to learn really over that rehearsal period just to be much more intimate with the camera.
Well, I don't know if you experienced it, but I've definitely read stories of Paul Annette saying very much the same thing to Jeremy Brett.
Oh, okay.
Because apparently he was being very big when the show was starting out, and it was Paul Annette who really kind of helped him hone that character.
Yeah.
So, well, our show is, as you know, dedicated to the memory of Jeremy Brett and kind of focuses on his portrayal. What was it like working with Mr. Jeremy Brett? Do you have any fond memories?
All fond memories. I don't have any not fond memory. He was delightful, as was David, as was John, as was Michael Saberi, who was playing
Mr. Woodley.
Mr. Woodley.
Mr. Woodley.
Right.
How could I have forgotten?
John
Mr.
Castle.
Woodley.
John Castle.
Yeah, John was Carruthers. That's right.
Yeah.
They treated me like a little princess. They were so kind to me. They were all so kind, and Jeremy, just an absolute gentleman, but at the same time funny, witty, naughty, irreverent. And I just had a fantastic time doing it, and because it was my first telly, I thought that's what it was always going to be like. Not so.
Where was that one filmed? Was that the house? Was it a National Trust house? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, a lot of it in Cheshire, which is actually where my family lived. I was born in South Africa, but moved to Cheshire when I was just 5.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yes, a lot of the locations were in Cheshire. And then on set, obviously, at Granada, once because they'd built the...
Yeah, 221B.
Yeah.
I was actually going to ask you more about that just the layout. Was all of it in Cheshire? All the outdoor stuff, the heath and the road where you're riding the bicycle? And
yeah, all that was Cheshire. It was, yeah.
Nice.
Lovely.
How many shooting days was that? Do you remember? Do you remember about how long the shooting was?
I think it was over 3 weeks, maybe 3.5 weeks.
Wow, so 3 weeks rehearsal and 3 weeks shooting. I mean, wow, that is certainly unheard of nowadays.
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, the attention to detail was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And maybe I didn't appreciate that quite then, but I certainly did once I started doing other television.
Well, and I mean, Luke and I are on record as saying that of the entire series, this is our go-to favorite episode. I don't know. I mean,
it's also the first episode we tell anybody to watch, the uninitiated.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
We always say to start with this episode because you get a little bit of everything. There's a good mystery. It's kind of quirky. And there's some great Holmes and Watson moments in there.
Yeah,
sure,
and it addicts you to the show immediately. It sucks you in.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful.
But it was the first one to be filmed, but it wasn't actually in the UK. I think it was the third one to be broadcast.
Yeah, the fourth one, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have much interaction with the producer, Michael Cox?
Yeah, he used to come on set regularly, and he was lovely. He was very avuncular. I think that would be the word for Michael. No, very nice guy, and I think very excited about the project. The research into it was huge, wasn't it? And there was just always a feeling of excitement, which that's very catchy.
Right.
So everybody, not producer, director, the crew. It was a very, very happy experience for me. I mean, of course, I don't know beyond that, but my episode. Although I did go on set to another episode a few months later, because I was keeping in contact a bit with Jeremy, and he said, "Oh, come and see us." And because I was back at my parents' house for a bit, I thought I can go and see them. So I did, but they were all busy. But I went and said hello, and then.
Do you know which episode that was?
But I can't remember. I can't remember which one it was.
That's okay.
But a funny little thing. So my parents living in Cheshire, and we were filming in Cheshire, and I must have had a couple of days off or something in filming, and when I was fitted for my costume, I was a slim little thing, and we had I had to be put into it by my dresser, and it was all stays and all the lacing on the back of the costume, fantastic costumes.
Yeah.
And I had never done any telly before, and what I couldn't get over was how much food there was. Not actually on set, but in the mornings the breakfasts, and then you'd stop for coffee break, and there'd be all sorts of things to eat, and then they fed us very well. The catering was amazing, and then mid-afternoon it was sort of tea and cream cakes, and then in the evening Jeremy Brett and David and John used to take me out for dinner, and there were some very nice restaurants in Manchester, really, and we used to go to really good restaurants, and they were incredibly generous, and they used to pay for my meal. They used to just, so so I was expanding. And I remember going back to my parents one night and surprising them, and I went in through the back door of my parents' house and through the laundry and into the kitchen and opened the door, and my mum was in the kitchen, and she turned round and she went, "Oh, Barbara!" And I thought to begin with it was that she was so surprised to see me, but no, she was so surprised to see how filled out I was. All that catering, I couldn't resist it. So then, the costume, my dresser was sort of having to not let out my dress exactly, but not pull it in quite as tightly round the waist as. So actually, when you watch it, if you watch The Solitary Cyclist, because we didn't shoot it in order, but you can see different scenes. My face going a bit like that.
No.
Well, I don't think I've ever noticed that, but
well, watch out! You watch out. You go, oh, you should right little Porky there.
It's a wonderful story, but I'll be surprised if anyone has noticed that. That's pretty neat.
But speaking of costume, do you ever miss the little hat and the hairdo?
Do you know my wig cost more than my acting fee?
Wigs are expensive. Yeah.
No, I because I was new to the game. They could get me on the cheap, and I think they did. Although to me it was it didn't really matter. But I was told that yes, your wig cost more than your fee.
That's amazing. Well, so now the question that everyone has been waiting for: Did your dress ever get caught in the machinery of that bicycle?
No. No.
No problems?
No. I was very adept on that bike. A lovely guy, member of the crew called Vinny, I do remember him. Really nice guy, and he used to stand. He was in charge of my bike, amongst other things, but he was always there to sort of help me onto my bike, and I think he probably gave me a little push, and then I was off. I never had any issues, no.
That's great. That's great.
Never fell off.
You make it look so easy, and yet this last time I watched it, I was looking at it and I was like, that could have been a disaster. That's great. That's wonderful. So I have a weird question for you. So John Castle's character's name is Carruthers in this story. Mm-hmm. And apparently in the UK, that name carries with it, or at least it did at that time, some rather comical connotations, which as an American, I've never quite understood. Michael Cox and the others, I guess, at the time were even thinking of changing the character's name in pre-production because of that. Do you know what that stems from? Why the name Carruthers is might be considered?
No, and I've never ever given it some thought. But the name, when I just sort of think about it now, you know those sort of naughty seaside postcards, and they're sort of slightly titillating, all very innocent stuff. But I think quite often the characters in those would be sort of Mr. Carruthers, and he'd be dressed in a sort of three-piece suit and rather rotund and probably smoking a cigar. That's what springs to mind with me. I can hear Paul sniggering next door, so he obviously thinks that I'm talking a load of rubbish.
That's funny. Did you go on to watch the series much over the years? Did you have any favorite episodes other than your own, of course?
I did. I watched it all. I watched it all. Favorite episodes. I remember there was one with Betsy Brantley, which I remember. It sticks in my mind. I can't remember which one it was called. I can't bring.
Is that the Dancing Men?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was very good. Well, and the first one that was shown, you with Gail Honeycutt. I mean, and she was beautiful, and I watched them all because and then I had friends in them, also friends from drama school. Suddenly, I'm doing a Sherlock Holmes. So there was always that sort of following it in that way. But no, I watched everything.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So. And not to bring it down, a notch,
go on.
You attended the Jeremy Brett Memorial Dedication in 2015.
I did. I got an email, or maybe it was a letter, but inviting me to go. And I thought I'd like to go. I thought I'd like to go, and I think she was hoping that rather more people would attend. And I think in the end it was just me and David.
Yeah.
But yes, dedicated fans, and of course I hadn't seen David for decades, and that was a lovely reunion. It was lovely to see him, and and when I worked with him, I remember him talking about his son who was probably only a little lad at the time. Let's put it like that. I wouldn't think any more than about 8, and of course his son now, Tom Burke, is a very very successful actor in his own right, and. But so yes, that occasion was it was lovely, and it was I think people were very pleased to see me, which is always nice.
Yeah.
And I was asked to make a little bit of a speech, which I hadn't prepared for. So, but about talking about Jeremy, and a tree was planted in his name, and so it was a very nice occasion. I was glad I went.
No, it sounds like it would have been a very moving experience.
Yeah.
Did you ever run into any of the other cast and crew from the series in later years?
I bumped into Michael Siberry a couple of times, but I kept in contact with John Castle and still am in contact with John.
Oh, great.
Well, I haven't seen him obviously for ages because of the virus, but I probably last saw him, was it last year maybe? Yeah. Or maybe it was the year before because was doing a theatre tour when the virus struck, so I'd been busy with that. So,
what have you been up to lately? And given the virus situation, what do you, what have you guys been doing over there?
Well, I mean, no acting.
Yeah.
Obviously, I make mosaics, which is a sort of began as a hobby, and then people started asking me commissioning me to do things, and then I sort of let that run its course, but then when it came to the virus, and you think, well, what am I doing with my days? I sort of felt the need to still do something creative. I'm a very keen gardener, so our garden looks splendid, but I started doing some more mosaics, so that keeps me busy, and then. Bit of this, bit of that. I mean, we were for 12 weeks we were locked down. So
yeah.
But we've managed we haven't had it as bad as some people. Let's put it like that. We've got a house with a garden, and you look at people who live with families with young kids in high-rise flats and haven't even got a balcony. So I know everything's relative, but we've been luckier than a lot of people.
Yeah. I feel like I'm just curious to know, did Jeremy ever give you any acting advice? Did he ever reach out to point you in any direction, or did he just?
Did he give me notes?
Well, I'm curious. He was the elder statesman, I suppose, on the series, so I was curious.
I don't remember that he specifically gave me notes, but he probably guided me, and I was always very, and I hope I still am, very keen to get any notes that might help me.
Right.
Why not? But I don't know that he did, or No, I think he really left it up to Paul to give me notes. And as I say, there are a lot of those were about keeping the volume down and not trying to do a theatre performance. Well, I do remember Paul saying to me at one point that my R's were a bit weak.
Really?
And I was a bit surprised by that. And he said, you're picking it up from Jeremy. Because Jeremy had a bit of a weak R, and Paul used to say that to him. I don't think I was picking it up, and I maybe I was, because maybe it was just instinctive picking it up, subconscious.
Well, I certainly didn't notice any weak R's in that episode. Well, Barbara, at the risk of, sounding like total nerds, this really has just been a wonderful conversation for us. And our listeners, much like us, we just love this episode. I mean, whether it's everyone's favorite, I can't say, but it certainly is in everyone's top 5 episodes of this series.
Oh,
and
God,
so,
that's
I mean,
fantastic.
it's really magical talking to you today. So thank you for making the time. I really appreciate it.
No, well, very nice to meet you. And it's good that you can sort of jog memories because, although it's all sort of there in the back of my mind, chatting to you and remembering things it was a very special time, and I was very, very lucky. I was. It was a wonderful first television job to do. It's never been so good.
Well, the show was lucky to have you, and we're lucky that you did it, because we can all go back and watch it over and over again. So,
yeah.
Thank you so much, Barbara. It's just been so wonderful.
That's my pleasure.